welcome to the Jeff Bullish Show. Today I have with me Stefan Debois, and Stefan is from a company called Pointerpro. Now, he's the founder and CEO, and they provide an assessment software platform that helps professional services companies to automate their advisory processes. Stefan is passionate about the use of technology to build professional relationships with people at scale. Before founding Pointerpro, Stefan worked for 15 years in several consulting companies as a consultant, project manager, and account manager. Stefan has contributed to 𝓬𝓬𝓷, 𝓬𝓬𝓷, mainly areas of entrepreneurship and digital marketing. In addition, he founded the Facebook group B2B Bloggers Boost Group, where top-tier B2B bloggers help each other to create content and get mentioned. Besides kite surfing and cycling, Stefan is passionate about the use of technology to build professional relationships with people at scale. He is married, has 3 kids. He lives in Antwerp, Belgium, in Europe. And some of the highlights, he founded the Facebook group B2B Bloggers, which you mentioned, 1,800 members. The other thing I'm very fascinated, though, is he climbed Mount 𝓬𝓬𝓷 in 1 hour, 30 minutes. And we might talk a little bit more about that. And I'm sure I got the pronunciation a little bit incorrect. But anyway, and he enjoys kite surfing. In fact, he's measured how far he can jump, 7.7 meters, and he loves cycling. And guess what? I love cycling too, Stefan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, you climbed Mount 𝓬𝓬𝓷 in 1 hour, 30 minutes. Now, tell me how to pronounce that correctly, because I'm completely stuffed that up, I'm sure.
It's called, 𝓬𝓬𝓷. It was not too far away from it, I think. Yeah, so it's a mountain in France, which is often part of the Tour de France, like a pretty tough one.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to let you know that I've actually climbed 𝓬𝓬𝓷 on a bike with no electric motor or anything. It was bloody tough, as they say in Australia. Yeah. Well, 𝓬𝓬𝓷 is on the Tour de France quite regularly. And it's about 14 kilometers of switchbacks at about 11 to 12% gradient the entire way. So I was just absolutely buggered by the time I got to the top. But it was a great experience, though. So you love cycling and you love kite surfing. Now, kite surfing in Europe, wouldn't you have to leave Europe to do kite surfing when it's nice and warm, frankly? It must be a bit cold sometimes.
Yeah, in summer it's okay. In winter it's pretty cold. But okay. I mean, there's quite some wind here in the North Sea in Belgium. So we like doing it in summer, and then of course, if you can, you go to another country. So I recently went to Morocco, to the south of Morocco, where really is ideal conditions. Always wind, sunny, like a nice sea. So that's really perfect.
Yeah. I really get fascinated by people that love surfing in countries where it's really cold. Or going to places doing things like kite surfing when it's freezing. We're very lucky in Australia. We actually have some very warm water and weather here, generally, even all year round. So I'm grateful. I'm not a surfer, but I do love cycling. So now, Stefan, you worked as a consultant for companies. Now, tell us a little bit about, because there's a lot of people on the show listen because they already have skills and expertise and they want to share that with the world and get paid for those skills. So how did you get into consulting? How did that happen?
So in consulting, after my studies, I'm an engineer as educational background. After my studies, I'd like to do something more broader than just like mechanical engineering. Consulting was a good opportunity because it allowed me to be in contact with different clients, different projects, also to go abroad. If you're young, that's a nice opportunity. I mean, if you're not young also, but I'm kind of glad that I did it. It's always a combination of software or like digital tools and automation that has fascinated me. In consulting, it was large-scale tools like SAP and Oracle that we had to implement in big companies.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, with my own company, it's a smaller scale digital tool, but which has also like a great impact on the companies we work with.
So what sort of consulting were you offering? Like how to grow businesses, how to be more efficient? What was the exact area of consultation that you offered as a service?
Yeah, so when I was at those large companies like PwC, 𝓵𝓱𝓪𝓻𝓷, and some others, we did large-scale ERP implementations. Like for example, SAP is the main player there, and Oracle is the, I guess, the US competitor from SAP.
Yep.
And we implemented those systems at also large multinational companies like 𝓦𝓱𝓪𝓽 or Nestlé. And those were really multi-year projects with often teams of 10, sometimes hundreds of people. So large-scale projects to really redo the full operations and back office systems from these companies. Quite complex undertakings.
Mm. So along the way, you got a little bit frustrated with the processes, and you realized that you maybe needed to change things. So when did you get the inspiration to go out on your own? You're working for the big company, safe job, getting paid well, obviously. So did you start as a side hustle, or you just went, I'm just going to be a consultant and start my own business?
Yeah, I started as a side hustle. Not a consulting, but like to create software with my background in engineering. I had some of those skills, although I had to refresh them because technology moves quite quickly. So I decided to do a side hustle, but then it was just like a quiz app that was more like a non-paying initiative, just to get me familiar with the technology and to also put it on the market as a free tool. It was called Tablet Quiz, because it was like for the iPad and tablets. It was like at the beginning, then when the iPads just launched, and it was pretty popular. Well, the free version, even companies in the US and larger players started to use it, like for HR events and stuff like that. And then came the idea to further evolve towards surveys. So from quizzes to surveys, and then also to assessments in a later stage.
Right. So where did the inspiration for the idea to do the quiz initially come from? Was it over a few beers in Belgium? Where did the idea for the quiz come from? Did you see someone doing it, said, I can do it better? Did you see that the problem needed to be solved? What was the inspiration for starting that quiz software as a side hustle?
The quiz software was just an application that I wanted to do just to get me familiar with the technology. So the first application of the quiz was like a quiz on my daughter's birthday. So nothing like, not a major business idea. But okay, I mean, it was like with like on the iPad with videos and audio, and so really entertaining. And then we switched to more business use, like surveys, but also make the surveys entertaining, which back in the day, most survey tools were like more research based, and data focus on data collection and not so much on the respondents' experience. So we try to enter or to include gamification, interactivity, and so, and yeah, with the ultimate goal to collect more and better data, of course. So that was the initial goal of, and back then it was called Survey Anyplace, and then afterwards we renamed it Pointerpro when we switched to the assessments. So the difference between the survey and the assessment is the survey is just data collection, and with assessments we use the data to give personalized advice. And then only then, in fact, the idea came to automate the advice process for consultants, because that was really something that I had seen previously in my consulting career. That first there was a need, and secondly there were no decent digital tools to cover that. But that was only later. That was only at the beginning of 2019 that we make that switch. Basically, yeah, before it was just data collection with the surveys, and now with assessments, it's if you have to say it in 2 words, it's advice automation.
Right. And there were some challenges along the way, and one of them was time to get results. So, in other words, when you're a consultant, you're basically saying this is what you should do, and then the client gets frustrated because it takes time to get the results they need, isn't it? So, and there's a term for that which you use, which I thought was rather good.
Yeah, we call it the time to business value, and that's the time between the moment that the consultant starts basically, and the moment that the first business value is delivered. In general, clients complain, or I think that this time is too long, and anything that can shorten that time is of course beneficial. Digitization, and then more specifically our tool, can help by achieving that, because yeah, the initial phase of a project in consulting, the as is or the diagnostics, or I mean, you have different names for it, but back when I was in consulting, sometimes it took like months to do just to check what the actual situation is at the client, but the client
Yes.
himself doesn't have any benefits of that. So if you can put that in a questionnaire, because it's always the same information that has to be retrieved, the questionnaire for the data collection, but then also if you can give some of the basic advice already automatically in a report, then everything can be automated until that's personalized advice report. And then the next step would then be a discussion with the consultant about that advice report. And then the discussion can be about how to implement the advice, and not just about what is the as is situation.
So you're initially intrigued by the ability of technology to help you scale advice as a human, as in business advice. So, what sort of frameworks are used to, one, because I suppose the biggest challenge as a consultant is discovery, which you've just mentioned, in terms of where is the client, what's going on, and that means you need to dig deeper. So, you have a set procedure or a set number of questions that do that.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, it depends on the which domain you're in as a consultant. Will be different for a cybersecurity consultant or for
Yep.
financial consultant, for example. But the basic idea is to have like a model, a business model or maturity model of your client's business. And if you're an experienced consultant, what I always say is you always have it. That model, you have it maybe implicitly in your head, or you have it
Mm-hmm.
written down on paper or in a document electronically. It's a model where you say, okay, let's say cybersecurity, you're at level 1, so you barely have antivirus on your PCs, so to say. And then you're at level 5, that's the level where the most sophistication uh, is present. Yeah? And then your job as a consultant is to bring the client from level 1 to level 5. I mean, that's a bit simplified, but it comes down to that. And then when a new prospect comes on board, then you can immediately with the questionnaire say, okay, you're level 2, and these are things that you have to do to go to the next level. And here is how I can help you with that. And then you can start the projects. So the first thing is to having a model, and that's independently of our tool or any tool. Just having a model, having it on paper is better than having nothing. But then having in the digital tool like ours is of course then the next step, and then the digital tool can do the work or part of the work that you otherwise do manually.
Well, that's very cool, and I totally agree with you. Like consultants have intrinsic skills which are in their brain. So what we're trying to do is get it out of their brain into and then next step is into paper. But of course that's difficult. A lot of writers in the past, for example, have used to write on paper. But the trouble is to go and edit it is painful and slow and laborious. So do you specialize in a particular industry or industries? Is that what the tool is set up for? Like, because like you said, cybersecurity versus something else can be completely different. So can the tool be applied across the board in terms of knowledge industries or companies? Or do you focus on just one industry?
No, it's different industry. I mean, it's always professional services. Even sometimes it's also like other industries, but like then those companies like an HR department in a big financial services company is like also an internal consultant. So mostly it's consultant and professional services like 𝓬𝓪𝓻𝓷, and it can be in every domain. Yeah, it can be in cybersecurity, in legal, in finance. For example, we have a very nice application which maybe will be interesting to for your listeners to look at. That's the website 𝓫FinancialPlan.com. And there, it's a guy who was like a US guy who was ex-private banker. I don't know exactly at which bank, but he quit his job and he created a tool that is basically financial assessments where you have to enter your assets, your income, and some more financial information. And then it gives you a personalized financial report, yeah, about what you have to invest in, what you have to do, and then those links or those advice which is in the report links to different service providers that he's affiliated with. So that's a way also to his knowledge about yeah, which advice you have to give to which client in terms of financial advice. Then he has taken it out of his head and put it in a tool, and now the tool can do the work for him, which is of course beneficial.
So is that one of your affiliated companies? Is that what you're saying, or is that just an example of getting something out of your head and creating a framework?
Yeah, that's just an example. That's just one of our customers, normal customers, but he's using the affiliate model, of course, to get paid or to monetize the assessment, because the links that goes with the advice in the advice reports are going to companies that he's affiliated with.
Right. So I'm just trying to understand that particular thing. In terms of, is he using your tool framework to create that? Is that what he did, or is this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the
So
assessment
yeah.
and the report that results from it is made with our tool. But of course, the expertise that he has put in, like which questions to ask and which advice to give, that's coming from him, of course. Yeah.
So you've got a range of different sort of tools, from quizzes to surveys. What are the different tools you have that you've created?
It's always three components. Yeah. First, the questionnaire. So to like ask like the data to ask a question that's comparable to like other survey tools. For example, in financial assessment, this could be like a simple question like, do you want to take a lot of risk or not a lot of risk with your investments?
Yes.
Okay. Then you have the calculation engine. It takes the answers of the questions and it calculates like an index or categorization. For example, in a financial questionnaire, this could be a risk index. For example, 0 is you want to take no risk, and 100 is you want to take a lot of risk, for example. And then the third component is the report builder. And it takes like the result of the calculation and it converts it into personalized advice. For example, you could say if the risk is between 0 and 50, then you have to invest or you have to give the advice to invest in bond markets. And if the advice between 50 and 100, then you advise to invest in the stock market, because that's of course higher risk. I mean, that's very simple, but it can be more complex. But there's a report builder, but the report builder is also, of course,
Sorry,
it's not only the.
So what's that called? What sort of builder?
The report builder report.
How's that spelled?
For the advice report, the report. Report.
Yeah. Okay, right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry.
Okay.
Sorry for that. So it's the report is also it contains advice, but it can also be branded according to the customer logo and colors and stuff like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm just having a look at your website here a little bit in terms of So you've got assessment software, 𝓲𝓵𝓵, 𝓬𝓲𝓵, 𝓤𝓻𝓵. Um, so, but
Yeah, all these things, like, I mean, that's perhaps also useful for your audience. We made landing pages for every like possible use case,
yep,
because we want to have like organic traffic, and like a use case like for 𝓬𝓲𝓵 or maturity assessments, or yeah, different other use cases. We make dedicated pages for those, so that people, when they hit maturity assessment in Google, that we can rank high for that term, because that's a typical application of our tool. Yeah, and that is, yeah, proven to be very, very beneficial for us.
okay. So do you use artificial intelligence or machine learning as part of what you're doing as well?
Not
How does
yet,
it,
not
not yet?
yet,
Okay.
because we say we want to first be a champion or be the best in like transferring the human intelligence. So no artificial intelligence, just plain human, old-fashioned human intelligence, um, to put it easily in our tool, so that the human without technical knowledge can put his or her intelligence easily in our tool. And that's already a big challenge to be solved, that we have to solve first before we are going to artificial intelligence, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a lot of work to do there already, even without artificial intelligence. I'm not saying that artificial intelligence could not be beneficial in the future, but first, I mean, there's still a lot of intelligence or like expertise in the human, yeah, in the heads of consultants
Yeah.
and other
Yes.
professionals that can be put in a digital tool, and having to have the digital tool to do part of the work, basically. Yeah.
So you started this business from an idea just wanted to learn about technology because you think it was being underutilized in the professional services consulting area, and you did that for your daughter's birthday, I think you said originally. And then you said, well, this could be applied to business. So that was maybe, so you're it really more started about from you being quite curious. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. I was just exploring different possibilities.
Yeah. So then you acted on that curiosity and started playing with technology and see where that took you. So, which is great. In other words, you learnt from doing. You weren't a technology specialist. You weren't a software developer. So how did you learn? How did you learn about this? In other words, did you work with someone else as a co-founder? How did you learn? Did you get someone else to help you?
Yeah, for the technology part, so I have a background in engineering, so that helps. I had to refresh, yeah, my knowledge, of course, because it evolves in all these years. But that went pretty well, because there's a lot of like online information available. There's a lot of open source resources that are really free and that are easily accessible. So that's pretty, yeah, easy. I would not say easy to do, but you just have to invest the time, of course. But it's certainly very possible to do. And then on the other hand, we had the more the commercial part and the marketing part. So the marketing part, I started also to learn myself, because I'm interested in that. And there's also in digital marketing, there's a lot of overlap between technology and the actual marketing.
Yeah.
And the more commercial side, I attracted a co-founder, Mark, very early, like a couple of months after we started. And then, yeah, he and I are a good complementary team, where he is doing like sales, customer service, and I'm doing marketing and product. So that's a good
Okay.
like split of tasks.
So number one, you continue to develop technology. In other words, you are trying to continue to invest in the technology itself. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so it gets better and smarter, and helps you scale. So, how do you? What's your strategies for marketing? How do you do that?
Yeah, so marketing, in the beginning, we in the very beginning, you rely on your network to have to collect some larger logos that you can then use to go for other customers. But I think I would advise to start with your network for sure, but then try to go beyond your network pretty soon, because it's the real satisfaction still comes when you have a customer from, for example, the other side of the world that doesn't know you, but that's just buys your product because of the product, and that's also very much more scalable, of course. And to achieve that, we invested in like inbound marketing. So in the beginning, it was SEO and search engine optimization and content marketing, but the content marketing was really in function of the SEO, like the landing pages that I mentioned. So we did that, and also in combination with guest blogging and link building, like the Facebook group. We have a Facebook group where we exchange content. So you write a blog for me, I write a blog for you. I mention you, you mention me, but of course in a natural way, not in a spammy way. So that is that is given a boost to our organic traffic. And then when we started with the assessments in 2019, we also added page traffic. So Google Ads, and also some others like Bing. It's expensive, but you have to try it, and if it works, then it can be beneficial in terms of unit economics. So you get more money out than you put in. But for us, it's also not very scalable. I mean, there's also so many search queries for assessment software and some similar search terms per month in the world. And if you go beyond, you have suboptimal search terms, and you have bad return on investment. So it's not really scalable. But it is what it is, and it's good to have if you can make it profitable, basically, the AdWords.
So you've created essentially software, and you are now selling it as software as a service, because I noticed that you've got Essential Pointerpro, and you've got Professional Pointerpro, and that's it's what we call software as a SaaS product. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a software as a service product. So you have indeed, if you look at our pricing page, you have the self-service plans. That means that people can sign up and like a 7-day free trial, and then afterwards, if they like it, they can pay it, the subscription with like just a credit card, and that's a recurring subscription indeed. And then you have also like the self-service or the non-self-service plans, Reporter and Enterprise. So Reporter is with the automatic advice reports, and then you have to first contact the sales team. They will give a demo. And then it's similar, so you can have a 7-day free trial, and then you can decide whether or not you buy the product.
Right. So one of the challenges with the subscription services is churn. In other words, you need to make sure that people remain loyal. What are some of your strategies to stop people churning?
Yeah, we first have like the customer success person. So we have also. We made the onboarding for the Reporter plan for the flagship products. We made many that is done by the customer success person. Then the customer success person reaches out on a regular basis to check how it's going. Whether basically you want to ensure that the intended benefits are achieved with our tool, that the tool is actually actively used. And that's the task of this customer success person. So that's a very important strategy. And on the other hand, we have also like the product itself. We try to make it more user friendly, more let's say we recently introduced like a drag and drop report builder instead of the old report builder, which was less user friendly. So we constantly evolve the product, so that the stickiness is improved, and people will like the thresholds becomes less high to use it, and that's also something that is beneficial for to lower the churn.
Right, and I wouldn't. I would say that part of the reason you started the Facebook group is to basically create loyalty through creating community. Is that correct?
Yeah, but the Facebook group is not so much about our customers who are in the Facebook group. That is something that we don't have yet. But the Facebook group is really a Facebook group of content marketeers who write about various B2B things, and that's okay, that you write a blog about 10 ways to generate leads on your website, and I have an assessment tool, and the assessment tool can be also is one possibility is an ID to get more leads on the website, to put an assessment on your website with an email capture behind it. That could be then one of the contributions that I give to your article, and next time I write an article and you give a contribution to me, and so on. So that's how the Facebook group works.
So one of the most important things with the digital business and online business is you need to be able to work out what works and what doesn't. In other words, you need essentially like a dashboard to tell you how many impressions did I get from organic, how many leads did I get, how many people signed up, and how many sales did I get, and then what's the lifetime value, which is so. In other words, how do you find that challenge of getting the data you need to make the right decisions on what you're going to invest in your marketing?
Yeah, we use a combination of tools. There we think it's important to have the end-to-end visibility of like which channel that customer used to get in touch with us. So we use combination of Google Analytics, and then we use also HubSpot, and then behind we have also Profitwell for the more financial metrics. And we try to there's also manual, some manual. There's a Google Sheet in between also where we just list all the prospects. So it's not like 100% automated, I would say, but it does the job, and we can see for each customer and also prospects that finally do not become a customer. We can see especially the channel, whether it came via organic or Google AdWords, like which campaign, and also like especially the cost of a lead. For certain campaigns, if it becomes too high, we have to stop the campaign or to optimize it. That is very important because our Google AdWords spend is around 20-25K per month, and if you make if you, for example, for some keywords, you make it too broad, and I mean, you immediately have 5 or 10K extra per month. I mean, so it's very important to keep an eye on it. For the organic traffic, it's a bit more difficult to measure. Well, it gets often attributed to the homepage also, whether when it's probably not a homepage, or people have come from another device and then they come like an organic search or a branded search to the homepage is always something that that means that the original search or the original touch point was somewhere else that you cannot track. So it's a bit more difficult. But it's not because it's difficult that you don't have to invest in it. I think then you have to take the aggregated data and look at it, and if it's like a positive return on investment, and I think you have to continue to invest in it.
Yeah, and because if you know what the lifetime value of a customer is, and let's say it's $1,000, and it costs you $200 to acquire that customer, and then you have to look at churn on top of that as well to make sure that so lifetime value is basically they're going to spend $1,000 with you over time. So if you spend more than $1,000 to acquire a customer, of course, then you're losing money, aren't you?
Yeah. With us, it's more like for the higher level plans, it's more like in the range of $5,000-6,000 lifetime value. But the acquisition cost is also much more higher. Of course, the lead cost is like about 300, but then the acquisition cost is like 2,000 or 3,000. So we are still figuring it out. That's for the paid traffic. For the organic traffic, it's a bit more difficult to calculate, or you have more. I mean, you have to take then everything that you spent in content marketing and divide it by the number of leads. So it's a bit more difficult, but yeah, I mean, overall we get like a positive return on investment.
That's great. So, and that then raises the next question. So, what is your who are your target customers? Because you've got a few, haven't you? You've got different landing pages. So, can you summarize what is your best or ideal customer or customers?
Yeah, the best customers are mid-sized professional service companies, like between 50 and 500 employees, and that have one specialization, that ideally already have a business model or even an assessment, but are doing it with suboptimal IT tools. So we often call it duct tape IT, because they do, for example, they use a Google Forms or survey tool to collect the data, then they export it into Excel to calculate some things, and then they the result of the Excel they put in a Word file that they have then saved to PDF, and that's then the reports. I mean, it's like a semi-automatic process, and they have that many transactions that this process begins to to be very like time consuming, and they're looking for something more professional. That's the ideal client, basically.
In other words, a services company that operates in a vertical.
Yeah, in one vertical. And again, we don't have a really preference for a vertical. It's all kinds of domains. But it's important that they have already like a certain digital maturity, and that they have already like this business model. If we have to convince them to create that business model, yeah, yes, then of course they are further ahead. It's also, I mean, we also have to do it. I mean, like writing articles on how you convert the expertise into a business model. We also have that. But the ideal customer is really someone who is a little bit further, who has already automated maybe some of the things with suboptimal tools, and is now looking at like professionalizing further and using a decent software tool to even become more professional there. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. So, in terms of what are some of the biggest challenges you've had since you started Pointerpro? What are some of the biggest challenges you've had that you maybe lost sleep at night, has created a bit of stress? What are some of those business challenges as an entrepreneur that you've come up against?
Yeah, in the beginning, when we just started out, I mean, when you come from a big company, yeah, basically in a big company, yeah, don't underestimate the brand power from like a PwC or yeah, these kind of companies. Mm-hmm. When you start out, nobody knows you. Yeah, really getting the word out, getting prospects, getting customers. That was in the beginning a big challenge, especially in the beginning you have the network, but then you have to go beyond the network, because otherwise you cannot scale your business. So that's really a big challenge. Then afterwards, like with the survey tool, like before we had the assessments, we were not really differentiated enough versus the other survey tools, and it's a crowded space. So our growth was really slow, and then yeah, the challenge was to find a niche to go quicker, like a smaller niche, but something that would make us more unique. And it took us quite some time. We sometimes we had some niches that we thought that were good niches, but then after a while we found out it was just a dead end. So we lost some time. So it took us until 2019 then to find the right niche with this personalized assessment reports, which was also not like a bright idea, so it just came from our customers who asked it over and over to have these reports, and then we developed it like with using other tools and connectors like Zapier. But then if you have done that a couple of times, then you see that there's a need in the market, and then we said, like, why not do it on our why not create a tool for that, which we did, and then we had really product market fit. And then it started to go faster. And now the main challenge is, as I said, now we have like the inbound marketing, but like the lead generation is plateauing a bit. And now we have to find new channels. to go further. And one important new channel is like this top of funnel marketing branding. We want to be less dependent on Google. We want to both organic and for the paid advertising. We want that our target audience knows us before they need us, basically. Yeah.
Right.
So which is easier said than done, but which can be achieved with like thought leadership, content marketing, but not about the products, but about like a higher level subject, like which is like digitization of professional service, scaling of professional services. We have to be really thought leader in that space. And then when people afterwards, they at a certain point they come to realize that they need like a tool like ours, then we will be first on the list.
So your biggest challenge, if tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, but biggest challenge was actually working out where the best niche for you was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
let me ask that next question then. That raises a very important challenge. And how long did it take you to be an overnight success?
It was between finding the niche, between starting and finding the niche, it was 7 years. So it's pretty long. It's too long. And what I would give as advice there is, I mean, if you knew it done beforehand, like what was ultimately going to be the perfect niche, then of course you could have shortened the time, but you never know. So the thing to do there is, if I would start again, is to evaluate faster whether something is worth pursuing or not. Because sometimes it took us 6 months or 8 months to see that we are like in a dead end, and that this is not a thing that we that will be product market fit and give us the growth we want. So I would do that faster, by iterating faster, by testing faster. It's that's something that I would do differently if I would do it again.
Okay, so what you're saying is iterate faster, but also make sure you're measuring well, so you know what works and what doesn't faster. Is that correct?
Yeah, and base yourself on the numbers and not too much on emotion, like because you sometimes have you have invested a lot of time and money in something, so that you don't want to stop it. But yeah, if it doesn't work, you better stop it sooner than later. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, better data, better decisions.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just to wrap it up then, Stephen, thank you. I think that's really, really insightful, especially in a digital world that we live in, is getting the right data to help you make fast decisions on what works, what doesn't, because otherwise you're going to be flying blind. So what are a few top tips to other entrepreneurs that are wanting to start a side hustle, whether they got their main job or they're starting out? What are some of the top tips that my viewers, entrepreneurs, people that want to start a side hustle need to know that you've learned along the way?
I would say the side hustle with tablet quiz. It's important to get it out as soon as possible, even if the product is not perfect.
Yep.
I was an engineer, and the product was far from perfect when I put the website online, but it worked. Then as from that moment, you start to get feedback, which you can use then to
iterate,
to improve the product again. So focus on marketing, on getting the word out, on receiving feedback, and then not too much on the technology. Especially if you're an engineer, you can be tempted to focus too much on what you know, and that's not good, because it delays the feedback, and then it results in like the time between you starting and finding product market fit. That time will be bigger than and for the rest, we'll always see that you enjoy what you're doing. It's maybe straightforward, but I think I enjoyed very much the fact that yeah, thanks to the digital communication and all the possibilities that exist now, that we can be in touch, like in the morning with someone of Australia, and in the afternoon or in the evenings with someone of the US or Canada, and then during the day, everything in between. That is something that I enjoy very much, even if it's when in times that it went, yeah, the code was not so good, and so then I took those things to get me those were the things that get me awake every day and motivated to keep on going, basically. Yeah.
Good. Well, it's been fascinating, and I think what I've learned a lot from listening to you is, in other words, you've got to play the long game. You've got to make decisions that are based more on data than on your gut, and keep trying things, keep iterating to see what works and what doesn't, because ideas are great, but acting on them is really the only way you find out whether they work or not. And also the other thing you mentioned too, which I thought was really good, was get customer feedback, so you know what works and what doesn't as well from them.
Yeah, exactly. As the idea of the personalized advice reports, I wish to say it was like a genius master plan, but it just came from customers.
There you go. I think that's absolute fantastic insight. And thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and experience, Stefan. It's been an absolute delight to have you. I've learned so much just by listening to you and your stories. And I look forward to hearing more about the evolution of Pointerpro as it continues to grow. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me. It was really a pleasure. And if people are interested in following me on LinkedIn, I'm mostly active on LinkedIn, not so much on the other social networks. You can just hit me up and connect. No problem at all.
Great.